Welcome to fellatravel. Picture this, you're sipping world-class coffee on a sun-soaked Caribbean beach, the aroma mixing with salty air, while mountains draped in green loom in the distance. Cities like Medellin and Cartagena buzz with color and life, pulling you into Colombia's charm. It's the postcard dream, paradise found. But there's another side to this place, a raw, unfiltered reality tucked behind the stunning landscapes and warm hospitality. Colombia, where millions face daily struggles, where history's echoes still shape lives, and where beauty hides some tough truths. On today's fellatravel journey, we're peeling back the layers to explore what the guidebooks skip. Ready to see the real deal? Let's go! Location and general data. Colombia occupies a strategically enviable position in the northwest of South America. Bordering Panama to the north, a vital corridor to Central America, and surrounded by Venezuela, Brazil, Ecuador, and Peru, this nation proudly spans both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, a setup that unlocks tremendous trade opportunities. From the sun-soaked coasts along the Caribbean to expansive rainforests, majestic mountains, and even arid deserts, its landscape is as diverse as it is breathtaking. In many ways, Colombia's natural features form a veritable treasure trove with all the potential for growth. Yet, this same prime location presents serious challenges. Its extensive borders and shorelines have turned the country into a hotspot for smuggling, where contraband goods and weaponry frequently transit under the radar. While visitors explore the historical charm of Cartagena's colonial streets or enjoy the vibrant ambience of Medellin's coffee country, many rural regions remain isolated with poor road networks, insufficient sanitation, and minimal government support. In remote areas such as Leticia in the Amazon, lively river depots bustle with both legal commerce and covert transactions. Furthermore, along the Venezuelan border, sustained unrest since 2015, fueled by a continuous stream of refugees, has overwhelmed local communities. Colombia's geographic blessings could make it a powerhouse, yet they also cast the stage for complex, enduring challenges. Now, let's transition from the terrain to the history that has shaped this resilient nation. The risk of being a woman. Being a woman in Cartagena feels like balancing on a tightrope every day. Even a night out in the historic center can lead to being quickly labeled as a sex worker, as distinctions between tourists and locals blur amid the city's notorious sex tourism scene. The police are often quick to conduct intrusive and disrespectful checks, or even worse. When you add deep-rooted machismo and bias, the burden only increases. Black women are frequently hit with cliched exotic stereotypes, and Venezuelan women fleeing crisis find themselves unfairly labeled. This vicious cycle remains a persistent and complex challenge. Inflation and economic crisis. Colombia isn't in freefall like some of its neighbors, but it's definitely struggling. The economy's been all over the place, influenced by unstable global markets, poor infrastructure, and ongoing conflicts. Inflation's been a real downer, hitting over 13% in 2024, which has made essentials like food and fuel way more expensive. The Colombian peso has also taken a hit, making imports cost more and stretching people's budgets. And hey, if you're into uncovering the real Colombia, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to fellatravel. We're diving into the hidden stories here. So why is it so hard? In the countryside, farming's a tough road. Poor infrastructure, violence from armed groups, and extortion mean crops often don't reach the market. Farmers head to the cities for work, but there aren't enough jobs to go around. Unemployment's up, wages are stagnant, and families are just getting by. Short-term fixes like subsidies are tossed out, but the bigger problems like land concentration in the hands of the elite and weak government presence remain. It's a cycle that keeps the poorest stuck. Let's take a closer look at the inequality fueling all this. Poverty and inequality. Colombia is a country of extremes. On one side, you've got luxury malls and secure gated communities, while just a few miles away, millions of people live without reliable access to clean water or electricity. In 2024, around 36% of Colombians were living in poverty, with 13 to 14% in extreme conditions. Over in La Guajira, the situation's even tougher, with 67% struggling to get enough food for the day. Even Bogota, a city full of towering glass buildings, has neighborhoods where raw sewage runs through the streets and kids walk miles to schools that are falling apart. The pandemic only worsened things, leaving people without jobs, prices skyrocketing, and temporary solutions failing to meet the need. The rich stayed insulated, while the poorest suffered the most, fueling a divide that drives many into the streets. Let's take a closer look at these communities in crisis. Favelas. Favelas, or barrios, no matter what you call them, the reality is the same: tough living conditions, sketchy sanitation, and a government that's nowhere to be found. In Bogota, they stretch out to the south, while in Medellin, they cling to the steep mountain slopes, creating a stark contrast. Comuna 13 stands out. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was a battleground for guerrillas, traffickers, and paramilitaries. Then, in 2002, Operation Orion hit hard, with helicopters and soldiers shaking up the place. Over time, things changed. Vibrant graffiti covered the walls, escalators were built, and the area became a hotspot for tourists with hip-hop culture and dance crews. But don't get too comfortable. The poverty and underlying tensions still linger, and locals know that this could all fall apart in the blink of an eye. The inequality here isn't just in the streets, it's embedded in the system. Let's dig deeper. Strata, the modern caste system. In Colombia, there's this system called Strata, which divides neighborhoods into 6 levels, from the poorest 1 to the wealthiest 6. The goal? To make utility bills fairer, poor areas pay less, richer ones pay more. Sounds good, right? But it's turned into a social barrier. Your address practically defines who you are. If you're in a 1 or 2, you're labeled as struggling. If you're in a 5 or 6, you're seen as part of the elite. It affects more than just your bills. It impacts loans, jobs, and how people treat you. Moving up isn't easy either. The costs skyrocket, and many stay stuck where they are. What was meant to create balance has only deepened the divide between rich and poor. Human trafficking. Human trafficking in Colombia paints a grim picture, with the country caught in a vicious cycle of trafficking people out through and within its borders. In Cartagena, tourists capture moments while Venezuelan women struggle to survive in difficult conditions. In Cali, indigenous children from Ecuador are forced into street begging. Rural men are deceived with promises of work, only to be exploited in harsh labor on plantations or in mines. This is a multi-billion-dollar operation with a global value of $32 billion, according to the UN, and Colombia remains a focal point. In areas controlled by guerrilla groups like FARC or ELN, traffickers thrive, preying on vulnerable families with fake job offers. Between 2010 and 2022, 62% of victims endured sexual exploitation, a chilling reality, especially for women and girls. Child abuse. In cities like Medellin, Cartagena, and Santa Marta, where nightlife and cruises draw tourists, there's a much darker reality. Underage children are lured into sex work, from seedy bars to rundown establishments. Both locals and visitors contribute to this hidden industry, paying to keep it alive. While busts like the one involving American Timothy Allen in Medellin with 2 young girls do occur, they're all too rare. Corruption and fear often keep these activities out of the spotlight. For the children, it leaves a lasting, painful scar, and for Colombia, it's a stain that's hard to erase. How do you even begin to comprehend that? Webcam Studios. Webcam studios are a hidden side of this harsh world. Young people stream live, aiming for big bucks without leaving their homes. It might sound simple, but it's anything but. Long hours in small, cramped spaces, crazy quotas, and the pressure to go further push many to their limits. The gear is shared, conditions degrade, and the mental toll is overwhelming. Meanwhile, the bosses, often from abroad, make millions while the government turns a blind eye. It's marketed as safer than street work, but the grind is real, and the big payouts are mostly a mirage. For many young women, it's another reminder of the few choices available. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger risks women face. History. Colombia's history begins in 1492 when Christopher Columbus arrived, and yes, the country's name comes from him. Spanish rule took a firm hold, but by the early 1800s, Simon Bolivar led the fight for independence. You'd think that would bring peace, but instead, it kicked off bitter battles between liberals and conservatives. Fast forward to 1948, when things took a dark turn with LA Violencia, a brutal decade of bloodshed that still haunts the country. By the 60s, land was concentrated in the hands of the rich, while rural farmers were left struggling. This sparked the rise of guerrilla groups like FARC, promising to fight for the common man with a Marxist agenda. The ELN followed with their own revolutionary spirit, while M19 made a name for themselves with bold urban actions against corruption. What began as a fight for justice soon spiraled out of control, with guerrillas getting involved in kidnapping and drug money. Then came the paramilitaries like the OUC, supported by landowners and businessmen to take on the guerrillas, often with backing from the military. The 80s and 90s saw cartels like Medellin and Cali making Colombia infamous worldwide. In 2016, a peace deal with FARC offered hope, but splinter groups in the ELN continue to fuel unrest into 2025. Now let's shift focus to the economic challenges affecting the people today. Structural racism. Colombia has a vibrant Afro and indigenous heritage, but deep-rooted prejudice persists. It's evident in the statistics: fewer job opportunities, lower quality services, and almost no representation in positions of power. Along the Pacific and Caribbean coasts, Afro-Colombians are the majority in the Amazon and rural regions. Indigenous communities continue to uphold their traditions despite being neglected. In cities like Cali and Cartagena, affluent areas shine, while marginalized neighborhoods struggle. Chaco, predominantly Afro-descendant, is a glaring example, isolated, underdeveloped, and plagued by violence from armed groups. The system labels it as mere poverty, but the problem runs much deeper. Now, let's look at another group feeling the squeeze. Abandoned old age. The elderly are feeling the pressure too. Inflation's rising and pensions, if they even get them, barely cover the basics. In rural areas, healthcare is a distant hope. In cities like Bogota or Medellin, you'll often see older people selling candy, just trying to get by. Many rely on their families or food from church-run charities. The government support is minimal, and rising costs only make it harder. It's a quiet, relentless struggle that adds to the weight of everything else. Now let's turn back to those guerrillas we mentioned earlier. Guerrillas? Guerrillas? They're still around. The ELN, originally driven by socialist ideals, now thrives on extortion in areas like Arauca and Chaco. FARC factions like Second Marquetalia rejected the 2016 peace deal, claiming land reforms never materialized. These groups control gold, oil, and forest-rich areas, dictating life in rural communities. Paramilitary forces evolved into backroom, such as the AGC, operating like cartels, taxing, enforcing local rules. It's no longer about grand ideals, but power and money, keeping the local populations constantly on edge. Let's take a closer look at one of the harsh consequences of this shift. Recruitment of children. Children get pulled into these groups with alarming ease. Organizations like the ELN, FARC splinter factions, and paramilitaries target poor rural areas, luring kids with promises of food or cash, where education and jobs are scarce. Some families push their children into it, thinking it's their only chance, while others face threats if they refuse. The kids are used as guards, messengers, or spies. Sometimes they claim it's by choice, but it's all a trap when there's no escape. The price they pay is steep: lost childhoods, hard roads ahead, and almost no support when they try to leave. It's a harsh reality shaped by ongoing conflict. Trafficking and cartels. Colombia remains the global cocaine powerhouse, and cartels didn't disappear, they evolved. It's now a worldwide operation, with speedboats racing across the Pacific, Amazon River routes, and hubs in Venezuela. The US war on drugs tried wiping out crops and funding busts, but it mostly hit the farmers, while traffickers adapted. Groups like AGC, Oficina de Envigado, and splinter guerrilla factions run the show, forming ties with Mexican and European cartels, even expanding into arms and gold smuggling. In certain areas, they've become the de facto rulers, taxing locals and controlling trade. As long as demand persists, this operation keeps running full speed. Corruption. Corruption is the backbone of the mess here. Politicians line their pockets while schools fall apart and hospitals barely manage. Scandals shake everything: education, healthcare, infrastructure, while money just disappears into shady deals or offshore accounts. Big names get caught up in the mess, but very few pay the price. Trust is gone, so who's even going to bother reporting when the system's rigged? NGOs and foreign aid are doing what the government won't, but they can't fix everything. That's why poverty, trafficking, and inequality just keep getting worse. The cash that's supposed to solve it all ends up feeding the same cycle. Colombia's got its beauty, beaches, coffee, and cities, but there's a side most don't see. From guerrilla territories to neglected seniors, it's a country full of contrast. What part hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments. This is fellatravel, showing you the raw truth. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories as we keep exploring.